Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publishers of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we'll be talking about psychiatrists, pianists, child murderers, French au pairs, and the Seven Sisters. It's Elephants Can Remember, the 2013 Poirot episode starring David Suchet as Hercule Poirot. But first, let me introduce my partner in marriage, as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa Peschel. Teresa, how you doing at the moment?
Hi, Bill. I'm feeling no pain. Folks, we just got back from the soft opening of the Fresh Market in Hershey, and I had some little tiny samples, tiny, I swear, they were just tiny, tiny samples of rum and coffee liqueur, and they were just absolutely delightful, and I feel very nice.
That's right, from Mid-State Distillery.
Mid-State Distillery. Yes, I think that's what I
that's what it was called.
My mind is already going. I think it was Mid-State Distillery.
Well, it certainly is better this afternoon than this morning because we sat down to record the podcast, and for some reason Audacity did not want to cooperate with Voicemeeter. I don't know what happened. They had an argument. She went back to her mother. Audacity went out and tied one on.
Probably at Mid-State Distillery.
Probably at Mid-State Distillery, yes. So it took me an hour and a half to try to work this out, and when it finally got to working, I said, screw this, let's go do something fun.
Let's go do something fun. So we went to the Fresh Market soft opening, and it'll be very nice here in Hershey, and we'll have to go back.
Yes, the life of a writer is not all drudgery.
Sometimes alcohol is involved, but only in tiny quantities for sensible writers, that is, who actually want to get anything done.
So let's get started on Elephants Can Remember. We are actually near the end of the Poirot series. This is one of the last 4 or 5 episodes.
Then our episodes will be considerably more mixed up, particularly as we move into the foreign adaptations, which should be interesting.
Absolutely.
But since Elephants Can Remember, let me not forget and add a shameless plug. We are going to be at the book signing event at the Groff Center in Lancaster on Saturday, the 17th of September, 2022. So there should be between 55 and 60 authors there, a wide variety of genres, and whatever kind of a reader you are sure to find somebody that you like that you've never heard of before. So if you want to come out and meet us in person and take a look at our annotated Agatha Christie mysteries and talk to us about our other books, we will be there. Again, this is the Groff Center Books in Lancaster on Saturday, the 17th of September in 2022.
So Elephants Can Remember, based on one of the last novels Christie wrote.
Yes, this was really near the end, and oh, it shows. You could tell that she was really fading. She needed a much better editor. A better editor would have brought out what was in there, but at the same time, even the best of editors cannot save something that she just wasn't firing on all cylinders. It actually has some really interesting concepts in it because it's about the fallibility of memory and at the same time what you can remember that seems to have no relationship to anything important, and yet it is important. In a way, it's a little bit like Five Little Pigs because Poirot is solving a murder that had happened over a decade before, one that everyone was sure they knew what had happened, but the young lady and the young gentleman in question and his evil harridan of a mother want to know, did Celia Ravenscroft's mother shoot her father, or did her father shoot her mother? And I'm not really sure why this matters. One of them shot the other, which means they both had issues. But at the same time, Mrs. Burton Cox is trying to find reasons for Desmond not to marry that girl, mainly because Mrs. Burton Cox wants to inherit the money. She wants to control the money. And if Desmond marries, then he comes into his inheritance right away, as opposed to having to wait until age 25.
Desmond was an adopted child, and it turns out he was actually the son of a famous Hollywood actress.
That's right.
Who died recently and left her fortune to him in trust to Mrs. Burton Cox.
To take care of her son.
To take care of her son until he turns 25 or marries first. And he is now not quite engaged to be married, but clearly besotted with Celia Ravenscroft.
Yes.
And Mrs. Burton Cox, it starts out great because it starts out with Ariadne Oliver.
And she is doing what what Agatha herself really disliked doing. And Ariadne is always Agatha Christie's avatar. A lot of their thinking and their reaction and their emotion is very close, and Ariadne is always uncomfortable at this sort of event. Now we see why when she is surrounded by people. Oh, Mrs. Oliver, I adore your books. They're so wonderful. Will you sign for me, please? And, you're, of course, thinking, I hope you bought this book. Having all these fans come up and swoon around you, making you feel all hot and bothered and embarrassed. Then comes Mrs. Burton Cox, one of those large women who gets her way. She heads every committee. The poor flinch when they see her coming, swill down their drinks, and head for the exits because she is going to do good works. You just know that she will. And she swoops down on Ariadne and says, we need to talk about your goddaughter. What? I need to know. Did her mother murder her father, or did her father murder her mother? Why are you talking to me?
There was a lovely little bit of byplay, and this shows how good Zoe Wanamaker can act, because there is a point where Ariadne is wanting to walk away from her, and actually tries, and Mrs. Burton Cox holds her by the shoulder. And she looks down at the hand on her shoulder and looks up. And she has that wonderful freezing look.
Which Mrs. Burton Cox, of course, completely ignores. Because why should she pay attention to what anyone else thinks? It's not necessary.
Yep. So we have Ariadne going to Hercule, who has another case of his own to deal with.
That's right. Because, again, this being the Poirot TV show, he has to be introduced very, very early on. Now, this episode is very Ariadne heavy. It's really her show, this particular episode, as much as it is Hercule's show. She goes to Hercule to ask for help in discovering, did Celia's mother shoot her father, or was it the other way around? And Hercule is, of course, he's not exactly retired. He only takes on the cases now that really interest him. But you can tell that he's getting older, and a friend of his, Dr. Willoughby. Dr. Willoughby, do I have the name right? Yes,
That's
I do
correct.
have the name. I can feel that chocolate liqueur. I swear, folks, I only had to swallow. Dr. Willoughby's father, Professor Willoughby, was discovered murdered in the hydrotherapy room in the basement of the Willoughby Institution, and boy, does it look absolutely gruesome. I can't imagine how anybody ever thought that shooting mentally ill people with fire hoses alternating between scalding water and freezing water would do one damn thing except piss them off and make them even crazier. I completely fail to see how being held in a bathtub, at least you can still breathe, how being held tied into a bathtub is going to help your mental state. I really don't get it. And Dr. Willoughby, who is a cad in many, many ways, he does tell Hercule that he doesn't think that this kind of treatment works, and so they don't do it anymore. But of course, it's all still down there in the basement, waiting to be put into use for nefarious purposes. And so it proves when they discover the body of his father, coshed on the head, and then dragged into the bathtub, cloth stuffed into his mouth, strapped up and restrained, and then drowned.
A very, very tragic death, a very horrifying way to go.
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily tragic. I mean, he did inflict this kind of treatment on other people.
But it was always with the good intentions.
Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
And in the end, he had decided that it wasn't working either, so he stopped doing it. Poirot is tasked with finding out who done it, and he meets up with Inspector Beale from a previous case, so
yes, they are working together
on it.
And this is obviously much more important. A current murder is obviously far more important than a murder-suicide that took place 13 years earlier. That is far more important because those people, the Ravenscrofts, they're dead and buried. So, I mean, it matters to Celia and to Desmond, but let's face it, it's done.
So we have Mr. Willoughby, we have his filing clerk, Marie.
Dr. Willoughby.
Dr.
Dr. Willoughby.
Yep.
He would insist on that, I'm sure.
I am sure. The filing clerk, Marie, who plays a role in this as well.
This is one of the things I always find interesting, and I guess it's because of a staffing shortage in the Willoughby Institute. But you don't see any nurses orderlies, or patients in the halls whenever the police are there. And I guarantee you that with the police traipsing around, Inspector Beale and Poirot moving through the hallways, as you get that shot down the hallway or walking past a doorway, you would see the rest of the staff peeking out, trying to figure out what is going on. But no, the Willoughby Institute is apparently completely deserted, other than Dr. Willoughby and Marie. And of course, Dr. Willoughby, as would be expected, because it is more convenient, does maintain an apartment in the Willoughby Institute, so he does not always have to go all the way back to Kent in order to spend the night with his family. That brings up actually a completely unrelated point, but I really was noticing this in this particular episode, how tiny England is, because I guess I don't have enough of an idea of the geography of England, but my goodness, Ariadne is driving all over creation, and Poirot is driving all over creation, and they go out to where Celia Ravenscroft's parents killed themselves, and they meet hairdressers, and they meet elephants, people who can remember, and they're all over the place. And I'm thinking, boy, this place must be the size of Delaware because you're able to move around so easily. I wouldn't dream of driving from Pittsburgh to Philly and back in one day. That's just not going to happen. But England looks really tiny in this show.
Well, it is, because for the New England states can fit the entirety of Britain. And make sure I get this correctly, because there's Great Britain, Britain, and England. And you want to make sure you get it right. So the island of Britain can fit within New England, from the top of Maine all the way down to the Massachusetts coast.
So if you turn Pennsylvania, if you reorient Pennsylvania so the rectangle runs up and down instead of side to side, it's more like the shape. But it's still 4 frickin' hours from here to the Pennsylvania state line.
That's true. Well, a lot of this also takes place in what they call the home counties, which are the counties directly surrounding London, because Kent is not that far from London. Another thing that is very much iconic in this episode are the Seven Sisters.
I was going to ask you, what the heck were you talking about with that?
Right. That's the chalk sea cliffs that are next to the White Cliffs of Dover.
That wasn't the White Cliffs of Dover?
Nope. These are White Cliffs. They're also chalk cliffs, but they're called the Seven Sisters because of the way the humps are arranged, and they actually have names. And when I was looking it up, I found out why they did this, because the White Cliffs of Dover, first of all, they're protected property. They have to be protected against erosion, so there you can look and see greenery on top of the cliffs and on the side of the cliffs.
Yeah, the vegetation keeps the erosion down. It doesn't prevent erosion, it slows it down a little.
It slows it down, but also the land around the Seven Sisters is protected. So you have all those fields, all those empty fields, no houses.
Oh, so no condos right on the edge of the cliff?
No condos on the edge of the cliff. It's all protected, and so that becomes a very favorite movie location for shooting. In fact, the Mr. Holmes movie from around 2013 with Ian McKellen.
Ian McKellen.
Ian McKellen. That was shot there as well. That's the Downs that Holmes retired to. Although the house that they've got in this place is not actually on the coast. This is green screen magic at its finest.
I was wondering about that, because that was a very nice house, but when Celia goes back to it, it has obviously been closed up and deserted for 13 years, and I'm thinking, really? Nobody sold that property so they, for the money? Because of just because of the taxes alone, you wouldn't want the upkeep and maintenance of this property. I would have thought it would have been sold immediately. And here it is sitting vacant, and nice houses alongside the coast overlooking the, I guess that's the English Channel.
Yeah.
Nice houses overlooking the English Channel do not go begging on the market for long, and yet there it is, clearly abandoned. Plywood, Holland covers over all of the furniture, cobwebs galore. It's exactly the sort of place that you go back to discover, did your mother shoot your father or your father shoot your mother? And you go out on the balcony and you look over and you discover that somebody else is there, and then they try to throw you over the cliff. Over the balcony, over the cliff.
Ah, yes, that's something that happens later in the episode. And it seems like through every window you do see the Seven Sisters. just like as we discovered here.
When Poirot went to Paris, he could see the Eiffel Tower, because wherever you are in Paris in a movie, and I mean, it doesn't matter one damn bit where you are in Paris in a movie.
You go to a hotel, you go to a mausoleum, you go to a cemetery, you go to the catacombs, you can still see the Eiffel Tower from there. And this is where Poirot later, he goes to visit the au pair in Paris, who's running a shop now on some boulevard. And yes, when Poirot enters, there's the Eiffel Tower behind him.
Wherever you are in Paris, you can see the Eiffel Tower.
So the story goes along two tracks for a long time, because Ariadne is advised by Poirot to go visit people, visit relatives, and because...
People who knew the Ravenscroft, people who are essentially elephants. She is looking into memories to see what matches, what stands out, what is incongruous in their memories, and to see if anybody remembers something important. And everybody remembers important things, but together they add up. As individual facts, they are nothing. But when you add them up, they really matter. And at the same time, of course, Poirot is investigating the murder of Professor Willoughby, and then it turns out that the two cases are related.
Right. So along the Ravenscroft track, we discover that Lady Ravenscroft had a sister
named Dorothy.
Dorothea, that the general was in love with, and then decided to shift his attentions to
Margaret, who was the sane sister.
Because he could obviously see that the other woman was just not right in the head.
And as it turns out, she is indeed just not right in the head. Now, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of our little episode here, that Agatha, when she wrote this, she was definitely declining. I think this was her next... No, Postern of Fate was the last one. Mm-hmm. And that was just absolutely a mess from start to finish. But she was really starting to fail, and she left a lot of loose plot endings dangling all over the place. And one of them is the fact that Dorothea, Margaret's sister, had two children. Dorothea murdered her son and blamed it on her daughter. And in the novel, you never hear one word again about the daughter. What happened to the daughter? The other person who got disappeared was Celia's younger brother. She had a brother whom Dorothea threatened. And that's when both children were sent off to school and to protect them from Dorothea. And well, he disappeared too, but he really didn't come into the novel. But the important character who was brought up in the novel and then disappeared was Dorothea's daughter. And because most of the novel consists of Ariadne Oliver interviewing elephants, such as Lady Julia Carstairs, who is an absolute hoot and just a wonderful opportunity to chat about how, out here in the country, you do one of two things. You either have an affair or you hunt. Pick one. And the old nanny and nanny's caregiver who used to char for the Ravenscrofts. And well, Ariadne is doing that. In the novel, she comes back from each opportunity to talk to an elephant, and then she recounts the entire conversation to Poirot.
Literally in the book.
In the book. And if you remove all of the repetition, you have a 50-minute episode. You have a short story. But these are supposed to be movies. This is supposed to be a novel. So the screenwriter, Nick Dear. And I think we've come across his name before.
Yes, he's written a couple of episodes before.
But he picked on that he picked on that really important fact. What happened to Dorothy Jarrow's daughter? And this is a girl who, her mother is insane. She's good at hiding it at various times, but she is insane. She has been treated with the barbaric treatments of the day, which I suppose are still an improvement over what she would have gotten in Dickens' time, where you're essentially chained in your own filth. So I guess hydrotherapy at least is clean. But you have the daughter. Her father is dead. Her brother was murdered by Mom, and Mom blamed her. Mom murdered at least 2 other children that we know of. And you're sent off to live with strangers in Canada, and what does that do to you? Especially if Mom writes to you. And That's something that Nick Dear came up with, and I thought it was really clever because it tied in a loose plot ending and allowed the episode to be not static. This wasn't a static episode, and I thought they did a wonderful job. They did a wonderful job with the film, and I really enjoyed this, especially when I compare it to the source material that they had to work with.
Well,
they
what they
really
did,
improved it.
Because what they did was they built the whole murder of Dr. Willoughby and tied that into the missing daughter.
That's right.
Because that wasn't in the book. Nothing, the Willoughbys were not in the book at all.
And Dr. Willoughby was essentially a walk-on character. He came on in one chapter talking about Dorothea Jarrow's medical treatment. He was not cheating on his wife. He did not have an affair with Mrs. Burton Cox in exchange for treating her son, what Mrs. Burton Cox thought was his psychiatric needs, and she paid with sex because she didn't have any money. He didn't do any of those things.
So this was tied in. This was probably the most mentally ill of the episodes. I mean, there's just a lot of mental illness going on here.
Well, also really bad professional ethics. I mean,
well,
I know that head shrinkers are people too, and the reason why an awful lot of people become shrinks is because they've got mental issues of their own. But I mean, really, this man had terrible morals, terrible ethics. You are not supposed to be conducting an affair with the mother of your patient, and she's paying with sex, which means how are you paying for the rent on your building?
I guess he had other patients for that. This was before national health care too.
I guess, but yes, you don't really feel a lot of sympathy for Dr. Willoughby. He's a nice man, and he is probably a better psychiatrist than his father ever was because he doesn't believe in torturing his patients by trying to waterboard them. But even so, he doesn't have any qualms about boffing his patients' mothers so that they don't have to pay with real money.
So we have that thread going on. You know, when I'm trying to think about these through, there's really not much that is going on. A lot of it was just Ariadne Oliver collecting memories of the past on one side.
Remember, this is a huge improvement over the novel,
and this
in
is
terms
an improvement.
of action.
Yeah, this all worked very well. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the hell out of this.
Oh, Desmond got a really much better character as well, because he really was just he was essentially an NPC. That's a non-player character for you non-gaming folks. But he was essentially an NPC in the novel. He was the man that Celia was going to marry. And you really don't get much of anything about him. But here he is a concert pianist in training. He is a dedicated musician. He has an outstanding memory. And he does know that like in the novel, he does know that he was adopted. He was adopted around age 3 or so. What is interesting here is that I think the scriptwriter kind of outsmarted himself at this point, because in the novel, Mrs. Burton Cox is an overbearing, pushy woman, former member of Parliament. Mr. Burton Cox was her second husband. Desmond is adopted, and she wants the money that is in Desmond's trust fund that he inherited from his biological mother, the actress who gave him up for adoption. And that's enough, really, for the relationship, because she's an overbearing, pushy woman, and she basically wants to control him and wants to control the money, and she has always wanted to control him, but there's never been a hint of abuse. And now, in the script, we have these hints of abuse, that she was an abusive mother, and Desmond does not get along with her, and then the script goes nowhere with this. So either don't bring it up at all and don't waste our time, or give us some kind of evidence that this is happening and why this matters to the plot, because you only have an hour and 29 minutes in order to tell this entire story, and adding extra stuff like this does not make for a denser, richer story if it doesn't pay off somewhere along the line, and it doesn't. And frankly, there was plenty of mental illness and abuse to go around when you consider Professor Willoughby abusing his patients.
Yep. So there's that. We also had a dog, and that should be mentioned as well, because this was a very special dog.
Yes, this is a very special dog, and this is one of this sometimes you run across this. Agatha has done this before. She did this in The Mystery of Hunter's Lodge, where the dog knew what was going on, even though no one else realized what was going on, because the dog's nose does not lie to him. And the dog knew that Mrs. Ravenscroft was not Mrs. Ravenscroft. He didn't like Dorothy. He loved Margaret, his mistress. And Dorothy pushed Margaret over the cliff and took her place. And Zelie and General Ravenscroft, at Margaret's dying request, covered it up. And then he shot Dorothy and then shot himself so that she would not harm any more children. But the dog knew. During those few days when Dorothy was masquerading as Margaret, the dog knew and bit her several times. So that's why there were bite marks in the autopsy, and that's why at least 2 of the elephants remembered the dog suddenly stopped liking her, and maybe it was because she was sick or because, they knew what was going to happen. No, it was something more basic than that. The dog recognized it. And when I was thinking about the episode afterwards, while Bill was wrestling with the programming software, I thought about, and I don't know the story, but you do, there was something in Sherlock Holmes about the dog that didn't bark in the night.
Oh, Silver Blaze.
Okay.
That was the horse theft story.
But my point is that when an animal acts out of character, the animal is telling you something important. And my guess is that the reason why the dog didn't bark is because the dog knew damn well who was breaking into the stable.
Yeah, the dog was friendly with the burglar, and of course the dog didn't realize burglary is wrong, or that it was his job to fight against anybody who's trying to break in.
Yes, because this is someone he knows.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason, of course, why the dog bites Mrs. Ravenscroft is because the dog knows it is not Mrs. Ravenscroft. And this is a very telling clue, one that Poirot picks up on. The other clue that they spent some time discussing, but they really didn't do as good a job as they could have of explaining it, is the wigs. And the reason why Zelie got the wigs for Dorothy when she was masquerading as Margaret is a new wig would help cover up the fact that she didn't look 100% like Margaret, even though they were twins, apparently identical twins, although, again, the episode did not bring this up, but the novel does. They are identical twins.
It's mentioned once. It was mentioned because that was near the end. Poirot was realizing he didn't realize that they were identical twins. And that's when the doctor says, didn't you understand? This is what we study. This is what my father studied, was identical twins.
Yes. And so Dorothy is Margaret's identical twin, but time changes how you look, so you don't look exactly the same. But then if you're wearing Margaret's clothes and you have a new distinctive wig that is a little tiny bit distracting, you will focus on all of the things that tell you this is Margaret and none of the things that tell you this is not Margaret. But that didn't matter to the dog. He knew perfectly well what he was smelling.
That explains because I was having some problems with the wigs as well, with the wigs clue, because we weren't sure why Margaret needed the wigs. Someone speculated she had had cancer, so obviously she would want it. But also that there were 4 wigs, and the last two were bought by Zelie when Margaret was supposedly in at the sanitarium, spending a week at the sanitarium right after her sister walked over the cliff. Yeah.
Well, the reason for the wigs was basically to complete the disguise, to make her look just different enough to cover up the fact that it wasn't the same woman. Now, what again, the novel brings this out, which is that a lot of women used wigs, especially when they were traveling, so they didn't have to fool around with their own hair. You comb your hair, you pin it back, and then you put on a wig, any one of 2 or 3 or 4 wigs, so that you can change your hairstyle quickly and easily and radically without having to spend hours at the hairdresser. And if you want a short cut, well, you don't have to cut your hair. You just you comb your hair smooth, pin it up, and then put on the wig with short fluffy curls, and suddenly you have short hair again. A wig is very flexible that way. And they go in and out of fashion. And when Agatha wrote Elephants Can Remember in the late 60s, early 70s, she published it in 1972, I think. I think wigs had come back into fashion. She did pay attention to that sort of thing.
Yeah, my mother wore one around that time.
Did she?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those weird memories that I haven't even thought about in a long time. But yeah, she had one.
Wigs go in and out of fashion for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
For they let you change your hair radically without having the hairdresser attack you with a dye bottle and a pair of scissors.
Well, and that's what they were bringing up with the second pair of wigs that were bought, because they were so different from what she normally wore. But I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a clue commenting on it or not.
Well, I think, and again, it wasn't handled properly in the novel, and I don't think the script handled it well either, but I think the point of the second pair of wigs was that it really made her look different, and that covered up any differences in the bone structure, and what age and wear and tear do to your face.
Yeah, and it's also a case where if that with their wigs off, Margaret and Dorothea, you could tell them apart, because I would think Margaret wore one because her hair was thinning.
I don't know. But again, she may have worn one because it was just what she liked doing, so that she didn't have to fool with her hair.
Yeah.
And so
I wonder if there's a subtext to the story itself, because it's a tragedy all around, but a lot of it was because of Margaret, the good girl who protected Dorothea, even though she murdered 2 and maybe even 3 children, and was
threatened
clearly
her own son,
and was clearly mentally ill. And even with her dying words saying,
you have to protect Dorothy. She doesn't know what she's doing. Well, I'll agree that Dorothy doesn't know what she's doing. But at the same time, this is really hard. What do you do with people who are a danger to themselves and a danger to others? You have to institutionalize them. But of course, if Margaret knows that the institutionalizing choice includes waterboarding, well, you feel reluctant to do that. So what do? You shouldn't be sending people out to live on the streets in Skid Row. That's really a bad idea, and that's just as cruel. What do? You can't really take people out and shoot them, because if they are a danger to themselves and a danger to other people. Because as soon as you start doing that, then you start shooting people because they are irritating to other people. You slide down that slippery slope like it was made of glass with a sheen of ice over top of it.
Yep.
So Margaret she's kind of in a bind. And of course, again, we don't know, Margaret and Dorothy being twins, we don't know if Margaret had, as she was growing up, been told by her own family, you have to take care of Dorothy. There's so much that is never put into a novel that fan fiction writers start up your laptops and start writing reasons for this. But we aren't given any reasons for this other than they are twins and Margaret loves Dorothy and she does not want her sister to be harmed.
Mm-hmm. And as you can tell, we both loved the episode and would recommend it.
Oh, yes. It was an enormous improvement on the novel. I really liked it. I think they did an outstanding job. I think adding in Dorothy's daughter was a stroke of genius, making her resentful, angry, vindictive, wanting to get revenge on her mother because she didn't know what had happened. All she knew was that her mother had been tortured by Professor Willoughby and then murdered by General Ravenscroft. She's the one who put on the boy's clothes and tried to strangle Desmond. She's the one who tried to push Celia over the railing on the balcony and over the cliffs and into the sea below. And you understand why she's so angry, but at the same time you can say, if these people had had better communication skills, this is where trying to sweep everything under the rug is a really bad idea, because nobody told Marie in the episode, but her real name is Mary Jarrow. Nobody told her the truth. Mm-hmm. Like Celia, she didn't know the full story. She only knew bits, and she knew all the worst bits, but she didn't get any explanation growing up of why that was happening. She may not have really realized that her mother had blamed her for her brother's death. She may not have really known that. People would have tried to keep that from her. She knew that her mother had been institutionalized several times because she got lots of letters from her mother, despite the fact that her mother was completely crazy, but she was still able to write a coherent letter. She knew that her mother had been tortured by Professor Willoughby, and she knew that General Ravenscroft had apparently shot her mother because she had been at the house.
That was the final clue where Poirot was trying to find out if there was someone at the house the police didn't know about, and it was her.
There was, because, and this is where the timing gets a little weird in how they filmed it, because I'm going to work out the timing here. Dorothy was living with Margaret and General Ravenscroft. She was in one of her sane phases, and Zelie had arranged for Dorothy's daughter to come out and visit them. Apparently she had been off in Canada with distant family or Zelie's family or something like that. She came out to the house, and the next day, Dorothy murdered, with the presence of a child in the house, Dorothy murdered her sister. And Zelie and the general covered it up, and Mary overheard the conversation between Zelie and the general that he was going to have to shoot Dorothy, that he was going to shoot Dorothy and then shoot himself because it was the only way to protect people. And all Mary heard was, "I'm going to kill Dorothy." And then Mary gets bustled off back to Canada with no explanation of what actually happened. She did not know. It was almost a guarantee that she did not know that her mother had murdered other children, including her own brother, and that nobody had really told her the truth. And she certainly didn't know that Dorothy had shoved Margaret over the cliff. And so she has a very different understanding of what's been going on, and she is coming out like an avenging fury to avenge the mother whom she never really knew. And if people would have told her the truth once she turned 18 and was presumably old enough to understand this, well, you wouldn't have had a novel, you wouldn't have had a plot, but you wouldn't have had a lot more deaths either.
Given the way the actress played the role, you kind of wonder if that thread of insanity passed down to her anyway. And she was like looking forward to throwing Celia over the edge.
Yes, she was. She was looking forward to it. And like you say, how much of that is because there's a distinct strain of insanity, and how much of that is because nobody told her the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these people would have benefited from better communication skills.
And maybe a good therapist as well.
But not one who's going to waterboard you.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode. I'll also mention that I looked it up while we had a break here, that Nick Dear wrote a number of the episodes of Poirot at the end, The Hollow. Excellent
episode.
Cards on the Table.
Really? Well, that one had some issues. That one had some major issues.
Yes, Mrs. McGinty's Dead.
Really like that one.
Really good. 3-act tragedy.
It's been a little while since we saw that, but I still think that the Peter Ustinov with Tony Curtis could give a run for the money, because that one in some ways followed the American storyline a lot closer.
Yeah.
Whereas the Nick Dear version with David Suchet followed the British storyline.
And Dead Man's Folly.
Oh yes, that one was problematic.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, I preferred the Ustinov version. I mean, I love Ariadne. I love Zoe Wanamaker as Ariadne Oliver, but I'm sorry, letting the villains off because they're aristocrats and not giving justice to the peasants is just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely wrong.
And next time, we're going to be jumping back in time to almost the very beginning of Poirot's career from Agatha, because we're going to do the Big Four.
That's going to be really interesting, folks. The novel is
a mess.
The novel is a mess. It was a series of short stories. I don't know if anybody has even ever identified the short stories that were squeezed together into the Big Four. Because when I read the Big Four very recently, and I did not see which of the short stories that are in the big Poirot casebook. I don't know where it came from, so I don't know exactly. Some Agatha scholar has to work that out. That's going to be really interesting. But in the meantime, I'll finish up with remember, we're going to be at Books on Saturday, the 17th of September at the Groff Center in Lancaster. And we annotate classic Agatha Christie novels. So if you want to learn more of the history behind the mystery, take a look at our annotations.
And available at information available at peschelpress.com. The books are available at all fine stores everywhere, including Covered Maker Books in Enola and Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop.
In Mechanicsburg.
And this is Bill Peschel.
And Teresa Peschel.
And we'll see you at the movies. Agatha Christie, She Watched, is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel. Produced by Bill Peschel. Theme song, Call to Adventure by Kevin MacLeod. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.